tonight what I want to do is kind of the opposite of last week when we were doing fast life drawing poses, 2 minutes and 5 minutes. Tonight I want to slow down and go back to this idea of breaking the body down into simple three-dimensional shapes. And I want to go quite slowly together, shape by shape, working from the center of mass outwards. And the point of that is not so that you start drawing these shapes every time you're drawing the figure, but more to help us start seeing the figure that way as we're drawing it, to simplify it. Because I think it's easier to capture the overall pose and get it looking right if, at least in our minds, we're breaking the figure down into these simple shapes when we're drawing them and not getting lost in detail. So I want us to go slowly. And as I say, we're going to work from the center outwards. And with each shape that you add, sketch lightly and just ask yourself, does this look like it's connecting to the previous shape well? Does it look like it's flowing? Does it look like it's capturing the pose? Doesn't matter how slow we have to go. I've got sort of 4 poses prepared, but whether we only get through 2 or something, it doesn't matter. The only thing I want to say up front is that the only part of the body that I don't sort of simplify into a really basic shape is the rib cage, because I find I don't really like the whole rib cage area if it's simplified into a block, and it's equally unsatisfying simplified into a cylinder. So that's the one area that I kind of draw it as a rib cage. You know, it's always something like, and it doesn't actually have to have the proportions of a rib cage, which is a bit different. It's more some combination of rib cage and outer body, but you know, it's a sphere with an inverted U like that, something like that. You know, but keeping in mind that that's a 3-dimensional shape with curves. It's not a block. So, you know, shadows are curving around on the sides like that. And, you know, you can imagine that there's a dark underneath or whatever. So it's kind of like a sphere, but it's got this cutout. So that's all I'll say about that. Otherwise, the rest of the shapes are wedges, cylinders, tapered cylinders, spheres or blocks, circles. It's all stuff like that. And just keep in mind that all these shapes are supposed to be 3-dimensional. When I draw a circle, it's not a circle, it's a sphere. I'm suggesting that it's an actual 3-dimensional sphere. And when the light hits it, it's going to cast shadow like a sphere. And it's the same with the blocks. When I draw the hips as a block, like you can see here, we can see 2 definite planes there, the front and the side. And that helps because when you're lighting the model and you're trying to figure out how to shade it, instead of getting lost in the detail, you can remind yourself that there's a front plane and a side plane. And that'll help you lay in overall shadow and highlight areas with which you can then fine tune into smaller details. So with that, let's make a start. But as I say, there's no rush tonight. We're going to go slow. So please follow me and take your time and maybe don't try to jump ahead. So I do want to do the gesture line always because I think that's a good habit. So that blue line is what I'm talking about there. So let's lay that in and once again, try to be loose and exaggerate. All right. So with our gesture line in, now let's go in and put this hip shape in, this wedge. Now, another thing is just pay attention to the angles here. When you look at what angle to draw, try to get that right. Sort of, I'm not great with the numbers of angles, but you can see that's not quite a 45-degree angle. It's flatter than that. So just try to follow these angles as we sketch this. We can see the line on the right is pretty much vertical, so we can drop that in. On the left, we've got this angle. And we can connect the bottom of the hips now. And we can extend out that left-facing plane. Now, take your time and make adjustments if you need to. Okay. Let's do the rib cage area now. So this is a very important part of the pose. These two pieces create the entire pose. So we sort of roughly measure where the base of that rib cage starts. It's somewhere about here, isn't it? And this angle of this line is very important. It's not vertical, it's not leaning to the right, it's leaning slightly to the left. And in length, it's about the same length as the sides of the hips that we just blocked in. Now let's put in this cutout. And we can flow that cutout, we can turn that almost into kind of a sphere of the lower belly by just continuing it like this. And that's kind of important. That'll help connect our rib cage to our hips. All right, let's block in the right-hand side line for the rib cage or upper torso. And sort of a convex line showing the direction of the shoulders. At this point, we can ask ourselves, like, is this working? Does it look flowing? Does it look stiff? Does it look balanced? I feel like my sketch is working okay, so I'm not going to adjust anything. While we're on the torso, might as well just block in the breasts. Actually, and as I do that, I sort of realize that something is off on mine, because either the cutout's too large, which I think is what the problem is, because I realize I don't have enough room above the breast to go up to the shoulder area. So I need to lower the cutout in my rib cage. Block that in. And that in over there. And I may need to raise my shoulders a bit. All right. With that, let's go down to the legs, because we want to get the figure anchored and balanced. So the leg that's taking most of the weight is the rear one. I probably would normally forget to sketch that first, but I think we probably should sketch it first in this case, even though it disappears behind the other leg. So that's mostly about getting this angle right. Now this is where our gesture line helps us, because it sort of creates this center of balance. We can sketch in a circle here to indicate where that overlapping knee is. And then we can just put in a tapered cylinder for the rear calf. I'm going to sketch that lightly because we want it disappearing behind the other leg. Not going to worry too much about feet and hands today. I want to get, once again, gesture, flow, balance, all that sort of stuff. So I'm not worried about the extremities. I'm putting in the overlapping thigh now, although I can already see a problem with mine. I want to back that off. I should really be starting at the top. We should be anchoring the top of the shape in the hip area. So let's do that. By drawing these shapes with rounded ends, what we're suggesting is that it's a sphere and it's not a flat cutout. Kind of like a tapered sausage or something. Once again, we can just step back and look at this and just ask yourself, is it looking balanced? Are the proportions looking right? How's the length of the legs looking compared to the length of the torso? Does your calves look too short? I'm looking at mine, I'm wondering if the calf is a bit short, but I think I'll leave it, but it might be a bit short. I don't know. It might just be because I haven't really given her ankles, but we're not worrying about ankles too much to know. All right, we want the ankle of this front leg to be obviously higher. So unless we can put in a little line to indicate that for ourselves. And let's draw this tapered sphere of the left calf. All right. So at this point, we've put in everything that sort of, it either does or it doesn't capture the balance, the flow, and the overall proportions of this pose. And so now's the time to just step back again. Just literally move back from your drawing, look at it as a whole, and ask yourself, does anything need to be adjusted? Because I do find this with figure drawing, there's no point continuing on if you've been working on the center of mass and whatever the anchor balance part is. There's no point moving on to anything else if something is looking off. You've got to fix it before you move on. The foundation has to be right. All right, but as you work on that or continue on, these next bits don't matter too much. I'm just going to roughly block in the arms. Now, when I'm sketching, I will generally put a sphere just to orient myself as to where the shoulder is. I'll just put a little circle like that. The shoulder's kind of tucked behind, but I'll do a light sketch to indicate that it's actually kind of behind. And then looking at the photo, we can see that the elbow joint, I'm going to circle it here, is kind of at a 45-degree angle up from the top of the hip there. So we can use that when we're doing our own sketch over here as a little reminder of how long that upper arm is. It's sort of here. And then we can just join those two circles from the shoulder to the elbow to create another tapered cylinder. And extend that out to the left here. Not going to worry about the hand on that side. To complete the pose, we do want to just not lose this other arm. So we've got some foreshortening here. Once again, we can use the body as a reference for where things are. So we know that the wrist is here, just above the hips, and the elbow is tucked in here. And this is where simple shapes become so useful. We draw another tapered cylinder like so, and if I put a circle on the front of it like that, you can really see that it's a foreshortened cylinder. It looks like a mannequin with the hand removed. Since that hand is kind of very much part of this pose, I'm just going to put in a simple wedge, a block like that to indicate the positioning of that hand. I won't even put in any fingers. Now we can anchor the head by putting in some shapes to indicate the neck now. Measuring from the left, you know, with our mind's eye, we can just put in the U shape there. and then just create a simple shape like that to indicate the neck. The head is generally, if you want to simplify it, it tends to work for it to just see it as a block with a sphere on the back of it, kind of thing. So just to indicate the direction of the face, the first thing I would normally sketch is just that outside convex line like that. And then we can draw a matching line on the other side, like we were drawing a flat sort of robot face. And to finish it off, we can just put a sphere behind that to indicate the back of the skull. Now, hopefully at this point, what you've got is a proportional, balanced, and still flowing pose between the gesture that we did and the careful building of these shapes from the center outwards. I'm going to wait till it looks like you've stopped drawing and then we'll move on. Okay. Let's look at another pose. So I chose this one because it's a different body shape. It's a man and he's larger. So there's the opportunity for more playing with more shape here. And when someone's larger as well, that question of getting the sense of balance and weight becomes even more important. So let's put in that blue gesture line again so that we have some flow. I'm going to raise it back a bit. It's not too dark. All right. So already, I mean, just with our gesture line, we should be able to look at it and go, okay, it shouldn't look off balance yet anyway. I mean, this is a funny one because it's sort of meant to be capturing, he's pretending that he's walking. You can see that he's not really, but so it is meant to be capturing forward momentum, which is always forward falling. When people walk, they're just falling forward and catching themselves with each step. So there is a little bit of forward momentum in this. And for drawing's sake, it would be better if we could make it look like he was actually walking, not just posing like he's walking. But we won't worry about that too much. All right, so center of mass, center of balance. Let's just capture that big lower circle. And yeah, and so that circle, you know, if that circle is capturing kind of the sphere of his butt, now we need to capture the sphere of his gut. And so two overlapping circles. Let's put in that second one. And it's kind of important. It mustn't be too far forward or too far back, but just in the right place to capture this pose. right. At this point, we really want to start scrutinizing it and thinking, are we capturing this? But the next thing that sort of completes it is the popping on top of the ribcage thing, which in this one, because it's a side view, almost is just a cylinder or a barrel type shape. So we've got that back line like so. Just a rough line here to indicate the bottom of the ribs. We've got the hump of the back of the neck sort of area. So you see we're almost kind of plopping a rib cage on top of those other masses. And this is the point where we want to step back and just ask ourselves, have we got angles and proportions working? This one I have to admit is a little harder to see. It's a bit unusual. All right. Now let's put in these tapered spheres for the legs down here. Now I'm going to get my bearings, usually I like to draw a little circle just to indicate the knee joint. So I'm going to draw that here. And if you look at the line of the front of his thigh, I'll draw on the actual photo here. See how it kind of lines up with the front of the, if they've got a curved line, it sort of lines up with the front of the rib cage shape. That's an important connection there. And it's something that will help us make sure things connect and work properly in our sketch here. So we can start from the rib cage up there and almost do a continuous line down to that knee joint. Something like that. That'll help us keep the whole body connected. Now I'm putting in the back of the upper leg there and the lower leg tapered sphere, tapered cylinder, or an elongated egg, or whatever you want to call it. Now with that leg in, we can step back and look at what we've got and ask ourselves, is this working? Might need to erase out that middle line there so that we can see whether all the shapes are actually connecting. There we go. When I erase out all the lines, I can sort of see whether the connection's actually working. All right, let's put in that rear leg. So the knee joint slightly higher because it's raised out to the back, just slightly higher. And then we can draw these little circles to indicate the heel, just to sort of ground the feet, whether we put in the front wedges or not. Using that heel as a reference, we can work out the height of this rear foot. Call it something like that. This is a point where when you're drawing, if you were drawing this figure and you were going to be spending some time on it, you could ask yourself, do I want to change it from the photo? Do I want to extend his stance here? It's not always a case of just copying the photo. You often want to change it, make it better, make it more exaggerated or more animated. All right. feel like my foot is a bit too high, this rear foot. I'm going to bring it down a bit. All right. So I feel like I've got good forward momentum on my pose. This is the time to step back and look at yours and just think, does anything need adjusting? Does it look anchored? Has it got some forward momentum? Does the upper body look like it connects down through all the mass of his stomach and area, but does it look like it connects down through the middle of that, through to the legs?
Yeah.
So the arms are important in this pose. It's all part of the movement. Once again, I'm going to put in little circles for where the shoulders are. And we're just doing these tapered cylinders again. The goal is to do this enough that you start seeing this in your head when you're drawing the figure, even if you're not doing all this construction. Even if you're going straight to shading for light and shadow, or getting lost in all the little lumps and bumps of the contours, but overall you're always stepping back and looking at these overall shapes and asking if they're connecting, if they're balanced, if they're flowing. Okay, we are running out of time a little bit, but this is good. I'm happy with how my guy is looking. I feel like mine looks a little bit more like he's actually walking. The head here is really just a block with curved tops and bottoms. Let's put it in because it is kind of important. We don't want it sitting too high. We don't want it sitting too low. He's not going to have much of a neck, so we want it sitting on top of that upper torso shape that we've already got there. This is a chance just to remember not to draw heads too big. Start smaller if you need to, and you can always make it bigger, but if you're painting with something like watercolor, you can't make it smaller. All right. Okay, we've got just under 10 minutes left, so I'm going to move to the next one. Let me just check what other ones I've got here. All right, instead of doing a full body complicated one, I think let's move on to this upper body one. I'll let you just sort of go on this one and apply what we've been doing on the first two. And let's see how we go. I'll still talk through what I'm doing though. So let's put in the gesture line first. Okay, So here I would start with the rib cage. When I say rib cage here, obviously I'm talking about my sort of simplified shape version of the rib cage. This is not the actual shape of a rib cage. And we really want to get the curve on the right-hand side of this, the fact that his upper part of his torso is tilted left and the lower part of his torso is tilted right. That's the key thing to this pose here. So we want to make sure this is working. Really push it and exaggerate it if we want to. And just keep pushing it with your sketch lines until it looks like it's nice and flowing. You might even want to put a line like that one that I've just dropped in to indicate the angle of his hips, which, as you can see, I've exaggerated from the photo, and I think it looks better exaggerated like that. And here we might do something different. We can put the neck in first on that center of mass of that rib cage shape. And there, just from those shapes, I can step back and look at that and go, yep, that's flowing and the shapes look connected. And then now we can build out from that with our figuring out where our shoulders are. The right-hand side camera right shoulder is obviously a bit higher because of that angle of that torso, so we want to remember that. You can see with each shape I add here, I'm making sure that overall it's making sense. Take your time with the angles of the arms. We want to get that right. For instance, I can tell that my camera left arm angle's a little bit high. It's not going to look as good if I leave it like that. So I'm going to raise that out and just lower that angle slightly. Kind of important to put those lats in as well, those back muscles that connect from under the arm to just to near the base of the rib cage. So take your time and keep stepping back and just having a good look at it and asking yourself, does anything need to be adjusted for the sections to look like they are sitting properly within each other? using simple blocks and wedges to indicate the hands here. All right, and got only about 40 seconds left before Zoom's going to cut us off, so I will sort of wrap up here. So thanks for taking part in this, and I hope the point of all this was to give you a way of using your mind's eye or just literal lines and shapes to get your proportions and everything working by combining these simple shapes and not getting lost in the details, and continuously stepping back and asking yourself if things are working, and remembering that you're allowed to go back in and erase and change things rather than push on with a pose that looks stiff or stilted. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dylan.
Thanks, Dylan. I found that very helpful with the block shapes.
Cool, great. All right, and love to see your drawings if you want to share any.